My niece looked me dead in the eyes at Thanksgiving dinner and said those words that cut deeper than any knife. "We do not sit with your kind, Uncle Stuart." The whole room erupted in laughter. My brother Gerald almost choked on his wine from laughing so hard. My sister Patricia just smiled and shrugged like it was the most normal thing in the world. I sat there at the corner of the table, surrounded by family yet completely alone. They saw an unsuccessful man in old clothes driving a beat-up truck. What they did not see was that the very roof over their heads belonged to me. Before I tell you how I became the invisible landlord of my own family, let me know where you are watching from today. Drop your location in the comments below. If stories about perseverance and unexpected justice resonate with you, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Trust me, you will want to stick around for this one. Now let me take you back to where it all started. I grew up in a modest house on the outskirts of Columbus, Ohio. Nothing fancy, just a 3-bedroom place with a small backyard where my dad would grill burgers on Sunday afternoons. My father worked as an electrician, spending long hours climbing through attics and crawling under houses to provide for us. My mother was a nurse at the local hospital, pulling double shifts more often than not. They were good people, hard-working people, the kind who believed that honesty and effort would always be rewarded. I was the youngest of 4 children, and let me tell you, by the time I came along, my parents were exhausted. My oldest brother Gerald was 10 years older than me. He was the golden child, the one who got the new clothes, the private tutoring, the fancy summer camps. My parents invested everything in his future, and he knew it. Gerald walked through life like the world owed him something, and honestly, our family treated him like it did. Then there was Patricia, 7 years my senior. She was beautiful, and she knew it. My parents spent money on her dance classes, her pageant dresses, her makeup and hair appointments. Patricia learned early that her looks could open doors, and she never let anyone forget how special she was. Douglas came next, 4 years older than me. He was the athlete, the football star, the one who brought trophies home and made my parents beam with pride at every game. Coaches loved him. Girls loved him. My parents loved him most of all, or at least that is how it felt. And then there was me, Stuart, the afterthought, the one who wore hand-me-downs from all 3 siblings, the one whose birthday parties were small and whose achievements went largely unnoticed. I do not say this to complain. I say it because it shaped who I became. While my siblings learned to expect things from the world, I learned to watch, to listen, to figure things out on my own. Everything changed when I was 17 years old. My father was working on a commercial building downtown when a scaffolding collapsed. He fell 32 feet. The doctors said he died before he hit the ground. I still remember the sound of my mother's scream when she got the phone call. It is the kind of sound that stays with you forever. After my father's death, my mother had to work twice as hard just to keep us afloat. Her health started declining almost immediately. The stress, the grief, the endless shifts at the hospital, it all took its toll. My siblings, who were already adults with their own families by then, rarely came around to help. Gerald was too busy building his law career. Patricia was too occupied with her new husband Raymond and their social calendar. Douglas was chasing his dreams of becoming a professional athlete. So, it was just me and my mother. I was 17, still in high school, and suddenly I was working 3 jobs to help pay the bills. I delivered pizzas until midnight, worked the early morning shift at a coffee shop, and cleaned offices on the weekends. My grades suffered, but we survived. My mother held on for 5 more years. She passed away quietly in her sleep when I was 22, leaving behind the old family house and a small pile of debt. The will was simple. Everything was to be divided equally among the 4 children, but my siblings did not want the house. They wanted cash, and they wanted it fast. Gerald called a family meeting and announced that we should sell the property immediately. Patricia agreed, already calculating her share in her head. Douglas just nodded along, as he always did, with whatever Gerald decided. But I could not let go of that house. It was where I grew up. It was where my parents had lived and loved and died. It was all I had left of them. I asked my siblings if I could buy them out. They laughed at me. Gerald actually laughed out loud and said, "What are you going to buy it with pizza delivery tips?" But I had been saving every penny I earned for 5 years. It was not much, but combined with a small loan from a sympathetic banker who had known my father, it was enough. I bought out my siblings' shares of the house. They took their money and walked away, convinced they had gotten the better end of the deal. Patricia even patted me on the shoulder and said, "Good luck with that money pit." Little did they know that money pit would become the foundation of everything. I spent the next year fixing up the house with my own 2 hands. I watched YouTube tutorials, read library books, and learned how to repair plumbing, electrical systems, and drywall. When I was done, I converted it into a duplex and rented out both units while I lived in a tiny studio apartment across town. The rental income from that first property allowed me to save for a second house, then a third, then a fourth. I devoured every book I could find on real estate investing. I took free online courses. I studied market trends and learned to spot undervalued properties. Within 5 years, I owned 8 rental properties. Within 10 years, I had 15. But here is the thing. I never told anyone. I set up a limited liability company to manage all my properties. On paper, the houses were owned by a faceless corporation. In person, I was still just Stuart, the quiet guy in the old jeans and the beat-up truck. I could have upgraded my lifestyle, bought fancy cars, worn expensive clothes. But I did not want to. I wanted to be loved for who I was, not for what I had. I wanted my family to respect me as a person, not as a bank account. That, as it turned out, was never going to happen. My relationship with my siblings only got worse as the years went by. Every family gathering became an exercise in humiliation. Gerald, with his law degree and his corner office, never missed an opportunity to remind everyone of his success. He would show up in his luxury sedan wearing suits that cost more than my monthly grocery budget, and he would look at me like I was something stuck to the bottom of his Italian leather shoes. One Christmas, Gerald asked me in front of everyone if I was still delivering pizzas. I told him I had moved on to property management. He smirked and said, "What, like a janitor?" Everyone laughed. I did not bother to explain that I was managing my own properties. They would not have believed me anyway. What Gerald did not know was that 5 years earlier his life had nearly fallen apart. His law firm went through a rough patch, and he made some bad investments trying to keep up appearances. He had to sell his house to avoid bankruptcy. I found out through a mutual acquaintance, and I did something that still surprises me to this day. I bought his house through my company and offered him a lease at below market rates. Gerald thought he was renting from a large property management corporation. He had no idea he was paying rent to his youngest brother, the one he had always dismissed as a failure. Every month his rent check came through my company's accounts. Every month I deposited it and said nothing. Patricia's situation was not much different. Her husband Raymond had built a successful import business, and for years they lived in a beautiful home in the nicest part of town. But 3 years ago, Raymond's business collapsed. Something about bad partnerships and overextension. They had to sell their house and downsize significantly. I bought their new house before they even knew it was on the market. My property manager handled everything. Patricia and Raymond signed a lease with what they thought was a corporate landlord. They never suspected that their landlord was the same brother Patricia had once described to her friends as someone who did not belong in their social circle. I remember visiting Patricia's house for her daughter Madison's 13th birthday party. Patricia had invited all her wealthy friends, and she made it very clear that I was not welcome at the main table. She pulled me aside and whispered, "Please do not embarrass me in front of my guests. You can stay in the kitchen if you want." I stayed in the kitchen. I helped the caterers clean up. And when I left that night, I drove past the house I secretly owned and wondered how my own sister could treat me like a stranger. Douglas was perhaps the saddest case of all. He had come so close to his dreams. He played college football, got scouted by a few professional teams, and even had a brief stint in the minor leagues. But a knee injury ended everything. He became a high school football coach, which was respectable work, but it did not pay nearly as well as he had hoped. His wife Heather had expensive tastes that their income could not support. They took out loans, maxed out credit cards, and eventually fell behind on their mortgage. When the bank put their house up for auction, I bought it. Douglas never knew. He just received a letter saying the property had been acquired by a new owner who was willing to let him continue renting at a reasonable rate. I thought I was helping them. I thought maybe if I kept them from losing their homes, they would eventually come around. They would see me differently. They would treat me with respect. I was wrong. At every family gathering, the insults continued. Douglas would send me to run errands because, as he put it, I had nothing better to do. His wife Heather told her children not to spend too much time with Uncle Stuart because they might pick up bad habits. Gerald mocked my clothes, my truck, my life choices. Patricia pretended I did not exist unless she needed someone to blame for something. Last Christmas was particularly painful. I brought gifts for everyone, carefully chosen presents that I thought they would appreciate. Gerald's wife Amanda opened hers a beautiful silk scarf and immediately asked if it was from a thrift store. Patricia's gift, a handmade photo album of family memories, was set aside without a second glance. Douglas did not even open his in front of me, but I kept coming back. I kept hoping, because despite everything they were my family. They were all I had left of my parents, and I kept thinking that maybe one day they would see me for who I really was. That day came sooner than I expected, but not in the way I had imagined. Thanksgiving arrived with the usual fanfare. Patricia had volunteered to host this year, which meant the gathering would be at her house, the house I owned. I found a certain dark humor in that as I pulled into the driveway in my 15-year-old truck. The house looked beautiful, I have to admit. Patricia had decorated it tastefully with autumn wreaths on the door and warm lights glowing from every window.